anything that helps people find God, I love. You know, if it's a style of music, we've all got our personal tastes, but if it's a kind of music that, when I always tell people, I wouldn't go play hymns at a high school rally, and I wouldn't go play, you know, hard rock power chords at an old folks home.
Right.
I would use whatever musical language speaks the best to wherever I am at that moment. So, you know, I think we're going to get to heaven, we're going to realize that, like, God's not into our personal
I appreciated what you were saying there, and I think just to kind of round off what was saying, I think the testimony of the broad appeal and the broad service that Integrity offered the worship landscape of America, I think is seen in the hymnals that were published in the '80s, because so many of the Integrity copyrights are held in those hymnals. I was just pulling one off the shelf, and I was looking all through it, and I see hymnals all, using Integrity songs all over the place.
Yeah.
You still there?
Yeah. I think our connection's a little fuzzy, so I got it every fourth word of that. But yeah, I think the fact that a lot of those songs are showing up is testimony just to the fact that they are touching people. So.
Absolutely, and then of course with CCLI, you see the broad appeal and the way that Lord's used them, and just, you know, so many songs from the Integrity catalog are in that top 100, top 500 list.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I have three quick questions to kind of finish our time. What did Integrity offer to the CCM, the contemporary Christian music landscape, that was not yet being offered in the mid-'80s? Here you come, this little, you know, in your words, this simple little company that's going to produce these praise and worship, whatever that is, records every 8 weeks. What did you see them offering to the whole CCM landscape? Was this really, did it really feel like something new at the time?
Well, I think that it's pretty obvious now. Just about every contemporary artist, you know, does something related to worship, which they totally didn't do back then. And I'm totally in favor of contemporary artists. So this is not anything against them, but I think it's pretty obvious that there's music that's kind of best to just sit back and absorb and let somebody minister to you. And then there's music that is a tool to help you personally connect to God. And it's just like you wouldn't use a hammer to use the job of a drill, and you wouldn't use a screwdriver to try to do the job of a pair of pliers, you know. And this different music kind of serves a different purpose. So I think as soon as Christian artists started realizing that, you know, we can not only minister to people with our songs, but we can also help them have a worship experience, you know, it was a great asset to them, because it started to turn some of these concerts into concert/worship times. So, you know, people like Michael W. Smith and, I mean, just about every rock band has done like a worship project.
Right.
And, you know, again, there's pros and cons. I mean, now that worship has sort of become a buzzword, every time I hear anybody say the Christian music business, I want to say like 3 words that should never be used in the same sentence, right? But it has evolved into that, so there's always going to be, you know, analytical people who are going to say, hey, you know, your band really needs to do a worship project. Well, that's like, you know, that doesn't sound like it came from the throne room of God at all. It came from somebody's marketing, you know, whiteboard. But, you know, you take the good with the bad. I mean, unfortunately, on this planet, you know, we're never going to be 100% rid of our human nature. You know, so there is that side of human nature that wants to say, for all the right reasons, you know, we want to sell 1 million records, you know, for God. And a little bit for us, but for God, you know. So, whatever. I mean, to me, just the fact that worship and just the idea of worship is getting widespread has to be a good thing, you know, in balance. So, I'm happy to see it. I just wish that more people would really get back to the essence of, you know, like Pastor Rick's book, The Purpose-Driven Life. The very opening purpose of your life is like, you were created to worship God. And that doesn't mean sing this type of song. You know, it doesn't mean any of that stuff that we think. Basically, worship is when you like stop for 5 seconds and realize who God is and what he created. Like, you know, he created the electrons that we're Skyping with at this moment, and he created our eardrums to respond to frequency variations so that we can identify melodies, and that's the God that chose to inhabit you. And your natural response is worship. You know, when you realize who God is, you respond in worship. So with that definition of worship, yeah, I mean, if we can come up with a song that helps people get to that place and identify who God is and just get their heart in that place, that's about as far as I want to take my definition of worship. You know, anything that fits in that is, for me, it's golden at that point.
One of the things I've appreciated throughout this interview, Tom, I don't know if you realize it or not, but you approach music, and this is coming from a guy who has lived his life in the music industry, has accolades, has experiences, has connections.
Never had a real job.
Has lived
this is all I've ever done.
Has lived your life in this industry, but yet what I hear you telling me is that you know, music is a vehicle. It's not the end game. The end game is worship. And that's such an incredible testimony, I think, to hear, that our students need to hear as well. Because so often we can get caught up in the song, and we can end up almost worshiping worship, or worshiping, you know, songs. But, you know, one of the things we try to reinstate all the time here at Liberty is, it's not, listen, the song is a vehicle. Sometimes the vehicle is a book. Sometimes the vehicle is a conversation. It's just a vehicle. The end game is becoming more like Jesus Christ and worshiping Him and living a lifestyle of honor to Him. How do you think integrity helped local churches worship differently?
Well, I think to a great extent just exposing them to all these new songs. I mean, that was so much our goal in the beginning, was we wanted to give them 14 songs every 8 weeks that could be new. Like, in a lot of ways, I had these different filters. Like, I would sit down and look at every finished album and say, okay, I'm a worship leader in a small local church. Is this album I'm going to give them, is this guy going to open this and go, oh my gosh, I can use that song, and I can use that song. Oh, my people are going to love that song. I can't wait to introduce that song. So I've got that filter. And then I've got the filter of, you know, I've got a 40-minute drive every day to work. You know, is somebody going to put in this song and just get to work completely blessed and completely turned around? So I've got that one on. You know, I've got all these different kind of hats and earpieces I put on when I listen, but one of the main ones was just that. You know, is this going to be a tool that a worship leader in a local church can use that's going to totally, like, take their worship to the next level? So I think in a lot of ways, you know, I don't know that we hit the mark every single time, but we were really trying. You know, that was our goal, and enhancing the local church was really high on that list.
And you know what? You may have answered my last question, but I want to give you the opportunity to add anything if you feel like you need to. What do you think is integrity's greatest contribution to how we worship in America and worldwide?
Well, I think if anything, God used integrity, and God used a lot of different people and a lot of different companies, but just to really bring the focus on the fact that people can gather anywhere and worship God corporately. Like, I think the general sort of impression was, when you go to church, whether you're in Africa or Korea or America, wherever you are, you go there and you sing 3 hymns, and then someone delivers a sermon, you know, based on the Bible. That was like what church was. And I think what God used integrity to do, and all these other companies, is to really focus on the fact that, you know, the idea of corporate worship as a kind of a living, spontaneous thing should be just as essential as the Word. So, like, you got your basic church services, worship and the Word. Worship and the Word. And just the idea that, first of all, that worship and the Word can, like, totally work together and reinforce each other, and that the worship experience can be a living, breathing thing. I mean, hymn books are awesome, but, you know, obviously things had gotten to the point where you go there, you open a number 596, and you read through the 5 stanzas. You know, the vitality that Martin Luther put into his songs, what did Pastor Rick say, 491 years ago, had kind of gotten lost when you just open to page 596 and listen to the pipe organ and do your bit and then sit back down. Just the idea of the fact that worship is a living, breathing participation sport. This is not a spectator sport anymore. So I would say, if God used us to get that thought in the mind of a broad spectrum of Christians, that would really excite me. Because I think that's the key. You've got to stay plugged in. It's got to be, if it's not living, then it's not God, because He's a living God.
Wow. That's incredible, and I think that's a great word to end on, and we'll just wrap up maybe this official part right here. But Tom, thank you so much for
it's been my pleasure, man.
I
really appreciate what you guys are doing. I think you got an awesome thing going here, Travis. I think you're right on for creating this, and we look back at the past so that we can chart our course for the future, hopefully even more tuned into God based on what He showed us in the past. So.
Well, it's funny. A lot of your sentiments that you talked about the early days of integrity are the same phrases that I would use to describe my life. We just feel like we're hanging on and just trying to keep up with God. And
awesome.
He's doing a work here at Liberty that we cannot explain in human terms, but we're excited to be a part of it, humbled to be a part of it, and just wanting to do our very best to honor Him.
Well, in that sense, I'm cheering for you, man.